Hello and welcome to EE 447. I'm your instructor, Gregory Myers. In this video, we're going to continue to work with HTML tables, including styling them or improving their appearance using cascading style sheets or CSS. For this video, we're going to focus on some simple style attributes, and we are going to use inline CSS and inline attributes. So to begin with, what you want to do is you want to revisit our example table underscore 01. And we're going to make some modifications to it. To begin with, I have changed the title as well as the file name. And just to delineate from the prior example, I have also added styled, so introduction to styled HTML tables. The other thing that we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and remove the foot because, at least for this example, it's an unnecessary element. So continuing on with our example from last time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to add two more columns. And so to do that, you first start off with the head, and inside the row that defines the head, we're going to specify two more TH elements, starting with the course description. And then the fourth column is going to be course tools. Now, as far as content goes, we're going to go back to our web page, and we are going to grab the content for each one of the courses that we've identified. 233, we're going to grab the description, go ahead and copy, and then we want to create two more elements for each row, starting with the first row, and we want to paste the contents that you've copied from our source into that third column. And before you forget, go ahead and create a placeholder for the fourth column. We're going to do the same thing with our description for EE 333. Notice that it is considerably longer. So go ahead and copy it. Create a third TD tag. Paste the contents from your buffer in between the two tags. And before you forget, go ahead and create a placeholder for the fourth column. And then lastly, we're going to do it for the course that we're in now, which is our EE 447 course. We're going to start off by grabbing the description from EE 447. And also go ahead and add that fourth column. All right, go ahead and save it. You'll see down here in your design view, you'll see an updated view of our HTML page. As well as, if you noticed over here in the browser, I have went ahead and opened our web page as well. And if we refresh it, you'll see the contents of our web page. Now, a couple things to point out here is if you notice that the text just flows and flows and flows. Second thing is if you notice our table is not that aesthetically pleasing. It's not bad, but it's not well defined either. And a few other things like, for instance, the inconsistencies in the placement of the head versus the text. In other words, this is centered and this is left justified. And so what we want to do is we want to work now on improving the appearance of our table. Also, something to point out here is if I minimize my web browser And as I readjust it, the size of our table also changes. And so what we want to do is we want to start exploring not only some of the style components, but also how we can control the behavior of our table. Right now, we're going to leave it maximized, and we're going to try to solve these problems one at a time, beginning with the border. And so what we want to do now is we want to take a look at an additional attribute that we saw earlier when we were looking in our HTML global attributes, and that is the style attribute, which specifies an inline CSS style for an element. What I want to do is I want to use that inline CSS style to create a border around each one of the cells as well as the table. So to begin with, what we want to do is in our table tag, we want to go ahead and create a style attribute, and your IDE should help you by auto-completing some of this. And we're going to start by typing just simply border, followed by a colon, and then it gives you various options as far as different possibilities. And so I'm just going to choose one here. We're going to maybe try a ridge. We'll see how that looks, and we can play around with it. And then go ahead and save it. You'll notice that now your table has a ridge border all the way around it, but the individual cells do not. As well as if you want to get a better look, you can go back to your web browser and refresh the page, and you'll see that at least you have some sort of depth in your table now. It's a little more aesthetically pleasing. They're not perfect yet. All right, so what if we want to have borders around each one of our cells? And so what you would want to do there is you want to go ahead and take your style attribute with our border, ridge, or for that matter, any other type of border that you would like. And then under each one of the cells, or for the head, it's going to be the column headers. And so we include a style attribute. And once again, I'm just going to pick ridge. There's nothing magic about it. But you have to do this now for each one of your TH tags. All right, as we save this, you'll see now our headers, or column heads, get borders around them as well. You can continue on with each one of your TD tags by simply copying and pasting the style attribute into each one of your TD tags. I'm just using Control V to speed up the process a little bit. And we've got some improvement in our table. Still probably looks a little unusual, maybe not quite what you expected, but you now have a border around not only the table, but around each individual cell. Come back here to your web browser and refresh. At least it looks a little more organized. Now, perhaps what we wanted to do is we wanted to collapse the borders so that the table border merged with the cell borders. And to do that, we can then come up here and we can continue on describing the style for the table by separating the values for the style by semicolons. And we can now also include the border collapse style attribute. And we're going to indicate that we want it to collapse. And so if you save this one, if you'll notice now, the cell borders have merged with the table border. Go ahead and refresh this by either hitting refresh or F5. And this probably is a little closer to what you expected to see in your HTML table. Now, note, there are no wrong answers to this. As long as you follow valid HTML tag nesting and valid CSS, at this point it becomes an aesthetics question of what you would like to see. And so, for instance, One of the things that you may choose to do is you may choose to adjust the alignment of your text. So we've looked so far at the borders, but let's also look at the text. And so let's say, for instance, that you would like to adjust the course number so it's centered with the head for that column. And so to do so, you simply use semicolons to separate your CSS info. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to use the text align property, and we want to change it to center. If you save that, you'll notice that now my course number is actually centered with my column head. Now, we may not want to do this for all of our fields or all of our cells in our table, so we may only want to do it for the first one. So in this case, what you would want to do is you want to very selectively come along and only modify the CSS or the style for the first column. So in this case, that's going to get text align center for the EE333 and EE447 cells. And if I save this, you'll see now that's all neatly aligned. Now, our table is still not perfect. It's looking incrementally better, but one of the things that probably should bother you is the fact that this text is just allowed to grow. And also each one of the columns are a different width. That may not be a problem in certain applications. In this particular case, let's see if we can adjust that. And so we're going to come back one more time to our source. And what we want to do is we want to take a look now at that third cell or that third column. And what we'd like to do now is we'd like to take a look at the width property. And so the width of the cell. And we've got a couple of options here. We can specify a value, or we can inherit a value or use one of the predetermined properties. When determining the width, you also have two choices about whether to use a relative percent width or an absolute number of pixels. So in this case, what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually make each one of the columns the same width for the first attempt. So we start off, we simply specify 25% for each one of our columns. Once again, all I'm doing is pasting our value very carefully here in each one of our cells. And when you save it and look at it either in the design view or outside in your table, in your web browser, you'll see now each one of our columns are the exact same width. And for some more additional information on this, you would want to go to the W3 Schools table width and height, or the CSS tutorial in general. We're going to go through other elements, but this just gives you another example. And we can play around with these to make the columns the appropriate width. For instance, you may choose that the width for the course only needs to be 10%. Rather for the course number. And then that extra percent you may choose to give to the description. So this would then bump this up to 40. And you can see now that our table has a little bit more of a consistent look to it. Lastly, you can also define the width of the entire table. And so in this case, what you could do is you could come up to the table tag and you would specify the width. And perhaps in this particular example, you would specify the width using pixels. Much like in the example for the CSS style for tables. And so you can see that you can specify not only the width, but also the height in both pixels and percent. And if I save this then, please note to be careful to include your CSS properties within your quotes. As you notice, I've got a typo here that I need to fix. So we need to bring the semicolon and your style within the quotes. And so to play around now with the fixed width, we're going to start with 200. And you'll notice now that it's significantly more narrow, more compact, and we can play around then with this value to find an appropriate size for our table. And where this plays a significant role is where you are using, when you're using devices like a tablet or a phone, where you want to force the behavior of a particular table. So you can see here that regardless of how I adjust the size of my web browser, the table will stay the same size. As a matter of fact, if the web browser shrinks, you'll automatically get borders. Last thing I would like to do in this video is I'd like to show you how to change the background color. Once again, the whole goal is just simply to make your table look a little more aesthetically pleasing. And for this example, what I want to do is I want to come along and I want to change the background color of my table. And so I can change the entire background color of my table. Let's pick a rather gaudy color here. Let's use red. And so you can make your entire table a single color. Or what you can do is you can make various elements within the table. For instance, the head, by simply changing the style of the T head. Or you can change individual rows or the body. So for instance, if we want to come along and choose a different color now for a cell even, we can come along inside the quotes once again and then specify the background color. And let's just specify aqua for this particular cell. This allows for you to highlight or emphasize a particular cell. Hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, do not hesitate to let me know. Thank you.